You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 133 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I'm happy to be sharing part one of the May SAA and COSA Speaker meeting, and this episode will feature Gerry J from San Francisco. During the pandemic, I attended an HIR meeting, and that's Healthy Intimate Relationships. So this meeting was on Zoom, where Gerry was the speaker, and this was an interesting share because at the time, Gerry was still in prison. He had written a letter that was read at the meeting for his share, which was so powerful. And just thinking about prisoners, I wanted to share a reading from Voices of Recovery this week on that topic. This is for December 11th, which is on page 346. And it starts off, "We are grateful for this opportunity to share the precious gift of recovery with our brothers and sisters in prison." And that comes from the pamphlet Writing to Prisoners. Prisoners convicted of criminal sexual conduct who have a desire to stop addictive sexual behavior through the SAA program are often forgotten members of our fellowship. I know this from firsthand experience. I was a consumer of correctional services many years ago as a result of my victimizing and harming others through my insanity. I know the pervasive feelings of shame, guilt, loneliness, ostracism, fear, self-loathing, and hopelessness that engulf sex offenders who are incarcerated. Back on the outside, we are often stigmatized by our culture for our past, feeling those same emotions. Prison can take many forms. I visit and sponsor a number of prisoners by letter. I offer them encouragement through my experience, strength, and hope, and I guide their work in the 12 steps. There are many challenges facing correspondence with prisoners, but they are manageable. I engage in this joyful task because it benefits my own recovery, and it affords me the opportunity to share the gift of recovery with those who are eager to receive it. And the meditation, despite my past and because of it, I have much to give. Grant me compassion and courage to reach out to others. It's a powerful reading. And in this recording, Gerry talks about sharing the SAA message by taking meetings into prison. If you are interested in writing to prisoners or helping with the prisoner outreach program, I'll be leaving links in the show notes of this episode to the guidelines and sign-up forms, as well as the page on the SAA-recovery.org site pertaining to prisoners. Additionally, there is more information on the ISO service site, SAA-ISO.org, and I will be leaving information for that in the show notes as well. So before turning it over to the recording, I wanted to mention that at the end of this episode, I will be reading some listener email and sharing a few pieces of music. And additionally, I will be talking about a final push for anyone in Northern California who wants to attend the sponsorship workshop coming up next weekend in Sacramento. So like the SAA and COSA speaker meeting, these types of events are brought to us by committees that devote their time and service for our fellowship. So back to the speaker meeting, Gerry's wife, Jenny, will be speaking on behalf of COSA in next week's episode. But now I'm ready to turn it over to Gerry at the May SAA and COSA speaker meeting. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm Gerry, and I'm a sex addict. Also a codependent, love addict, quite a few other things. Thanks for that, Tom, and thanks for reminding me to be really aware of my feelings and what the feelings indicate. I'm surprised. For me, I'm surprised at. I'm nervous, and and just feeling a lot that I can't, that's just stirring around. I'm feeling sorrow and fear and joy and gratitude and all these things at once. And they get a little bollocksy, a little confused in my head. And I know sometimes too, I have a tendency, I know I'm feeling self-conscious because my partner is listening to this, which isn't usually the case at an SAA meeting. And I'm feeling some self-consciousness just because there's a sense that this is sort of a bigger deal than just a share. And I'm bringing that stuff on me. So I want to say the first part of the third step prayer, which is this powerful couplet that I say to myself a great deal when I'm having trouble showing up for the world and what I need to do. God, I offer myself to build with me and do with me what you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do your will. And bondage of self is kind of what this story is about. And it's a bondage that held me for a long time. And it's a bondage that has been really hard to get out of, to get free from. It is a bondage that caused me multiple relapses and slides in recovery. And it's just, bondage that just didn't want to let go, but it has been letting go. I am more free now in my heart and in my mind and in my soul than I've ever been. And I think there's still some journey there, but I'm at a place that I never was before. And I didn't even know that this was really possible. I have a tendency to get a little lost in the complexity and the drama of my story. It is dramatic. The story of my acting out culminates in 4 years in federal prison, but before that, there was other insanity, mess, chaos, tremendous harm done to other people. I can vanish into that, and I'm going to try to stay fairly tight with that, and then talk more about what it's like now and what tools I use now. But I know that long, complicated past is kind of beckoning, and it has a certain seductive power. My mother was, I believe, a victim of borderline personality disorder. They didn't diagnose that then, but I'll tell psychologists about my mother, and two of them just jumped right in with, it sounds like she was a borderline, and I just keep finding these correspondences. And then when I read about children of borderline mothers, it's kind of me. So she was extremely unpredictable. She could be absolutely loving and attentive and wonderful and completely focused on me, or she could be cold. She could be cruel. I lived in constant insecurity as a kid. I learned not to show that insecurity, not to show fear, not to show anything that would make her feel that she wasn't being a perfect mother, because that's where trouble would happen. So I grew up learning to manage, learning to be exactly what she wanted me to be, which was some sort of angelic little thing that never complained, never had needs. I learned not to see my own needs. I learned not to understand myself. I learned to shapeshift. I learned not to trust the truth. The truth was scary. Vulnerability was terrifying. A lot of times it just didn't go well. And so I developed a really placid, really likable exterior, very, very steady, and very much what other people wanted to see in a nice little kid. And I also developed a really rich inner life. I made up stories. I learned things. I did collecting and all sorts of things that soothed my anxiety and enabled me to compartmentalize and detach from the scary everyday that I had. And I had the model of my dad, who was completely dedicated to managing my mother and walking on eggshells himself, and always telling me, "We can't upset your mother. We can't upset your mother." And so I had this as an operating system, and I was pretty good at it. And I had shame. I had a lot of shame because I just always thought that I was wrong. I was off. When I got right up against puberty, my mother pulled me out of school. So I missed the first 2 years of high school and was just in the house, and missed this incredibly important, and most of eighth grade, missed this incredibly important time to find out who I was in the world and who I was as a nascently sexual person. my mom used alcohol and love affairs to medicate her pain. And this sex was in the air as a scary thing, powerful, somehow wrong, somehow necessary, somehow seductive, but complicated. So I brought that into my adolescence. Once I got back sort of into the normal world, I found two things in my high school years. One was a career, which was writing. It was a way to do the inner life and the control and all that. It was also a way to be special. Because I loved my mother's attention so much, I was just yearning always to be found special, to be loved, to be admired, to be seen. And so I was in this strange where I needed these something attention getting that could make me feel special, while also seeming to be just non-confrontational, conflict, no conflict, no bumps, no difficulties. And writing was a way to get the specialness, but keep it all, do all the hard stuff inside. And I met my partner. I met Jenny at the end of high school, and she was so different from my mother. It was wonderful. Just a very steady person. It seemed very practical, very, very worldly oriented. But as I've come to learn, she had her own intimacy issues, and she had her own control issues. And so she was also someone I could be attached with, I could be with, I could seek support from, I could spend time with, I could have sex with, but I didn't have to be vulnerable because she didn't want to go there either. And I could show up as a people pleaser because she had a very strong sense of how she wanted things to be. And so I could get into this place that was kind of similar to how I was with my mother, even though the other person was completely different in every visible way. And that worked for a long time. It worked pretty well when we were dating, and it worked when we first bought a condo and moved in together in our late 20s. It got harder the more domestic we got, as we really moved in together, as we bought a house, as we planned to have a child. I was just doing so much self-repression. I was just still working so hard not to know myself. I was showing up for what Jenny wanted, letting her control things, but becoming increasingly resentful. At the same time, the work was, I think, less satisfying because I was becoming successful. I was quite a successful writer for a while, at least financially, but it lost some of that initial charge, and the work got mixed up with money, and the money was mixed up with pleasing my wife and playing this role and being this person that I thought other people wanted me to be. And it was when Jenny and I were planning to have a kid, when I was really taking on adulthood, that I discovered the power of another woman's attention. I found a woman who was just really taken with me, and I discovered that my writing career was a great hook. And I didn't want it to be sexual. All my issues about sex were coming up, and I didn't want to cheat on Jenny, and I didn't want to have that secret. But I wanted to have her attention. I wanted to have her focus. I wanted to have her adoration. And that meant building this whole secret life around that. And then from there, it seemed like sex had to happen, So I feel that was where the addiction kicked in. I feel it was a love addiction more than anything, or a love meaning infatuation, attention, adoration, not love. And that set me off for years. I will have to zip through, but Jenny discovered this. I slept with a woman when Jenny was pregnant. Jenny discovered it when she was pregnant. I just caused this tremendous harm. And then I thought I was all better, and I went into therapy, and I was never going to do this again. But Jenny and I stayed stuck. If Jenny was depressed and she had a postpartum depression, I would make it about me. I would resent it. I was thinking I was back in that scared place where mom was turning away from me. And so I kept seeking other women's attention. And sometimes it was not sexual, and sometimes it was. And I just kept cheating on her, enabling her to discover things, because part of me wanted to be discovered so it could blow things up, so I could just feel the shame openly and change things. And I think I thought if I kept getting discovered, then I would have to tell the truth. But I still never. I was just terrified of the truth, and so I would lie, I would downplay, I would minimize, I would hang on to Jenny that way. it seemed like she was usually willing to buy into my minimizations and settle for that. And so we just kept going with this good times, bad times, me straying, me doing bad things, causing pain. Finally got into Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. I was messy enough that I said, there's something out of control there, and I need to do that. And first I was kind of first I was enthusiastic, then I got kind of half-assed, and I kept acting out. And then I got into the internet. And I feel like I've already gone on too long about just the past here, but it's revealing of things. The internet was a magnificent escape. I could use it for my work. I could vanish into it. I could soothe myself with it. And I discovered I could connect with people. And I was vowing not to flirt with female friends. I was doing this SLAA work, trying to get the boundaries stronger. But I connected online with a 16-year-old girl. And I've had issues off and on where the attention from an adolescent girl was really powerful for me. And it would pull me back to that early high school trauma, and it seemed like a way to fill that hole. And it was just such a high grade drug. It was female attention at such a powerful level. But I built a relationship with her, and I realized now that I was grooming her. I was grooming her to fall in love with me. I was grooming her to be attracted to me. I hate that, applying that word to myself. It took a long time for me to get there. I just thought I was being a helpful adult friend to her and a confidant, and I was whatever. The rationalizations and compartmentalization are so powerful. And then when she was 17, she lived in another country. I actually went there and was with her, which is hard to talk about even now. I've talked about it a lot, but sitting here, the hunger, the neediness, the desperation I was in, and how I was able to make excuses for this. So Jenny learned about that. This led to Jenny entering COSA. It led to me really working SLA hard. It led to a wonderful period where we were working on our relationship spectacularly and communicating as we had never communicated before. And I thought I was fixed because I saw that all my boundaries with other women were different. I thought, if this relationship gets fixed, I was so much about Jenny and Jenny's approval and acceptance that I thought, if this relationship gets fixed, then I'm fixed. Except that I wasn't looking at the fact that I was having incredible anxiety about my writing career and my work, and I was disappearing into things not sexual things at first, but just using the computer as an escape, running away. And that led me to getting, and that plus what had awakened in me with this relationship with this girl, this teenager. After a few years of what I thought was really good recovery, I started looking at things online about teenage girls. I started looking at, just first not illegal, not sexual, not whatever, but then I started to want to see everything. And part of my addiction, because of this good boy thing I've always been holding up, is to go to the bad boy place. It's to go to the stuff that seems forbidden and wrong. And I went there and, downloaded child pornography, a lot of it, and got myself caught in my pattern, got myself caught quickly. And in downloading these massive files, I just had thousands of things of every kind of horrible, exploitative pornography. And in doing that, I actively participated in the exploitation of children. I did something that would have been inconceivable to me once. It was make-believe in my head. It was a compartment. Somehow didn't seem to be about my reality, but it was very real. It's real pain and real damage. So at that point, I entered SAA because in SLAA, I had found people and a sponsor in a realm where we didn't talk about porn and we didn't talk about any of that stuff. And I was able to put that in a box and work on one part of recovery and not work on that part of recovery. But I knew SAA, they talked about these things. And I went to a sex addiction therapist and just attacked it all in a new way, started to dig. And I figured out rather early I was going to prison. I had 2 years out here with Jenny, with SAA, before going in, and still struggled with honesty. There were still things I concealed from Jenny that I let her discover on my computer after I was in prison. It's just been so hard to want to go back. I pretend things don't exist once I'm past them, close the computer and it's like it doesn't exist. So I still have things for her. Another landmine. And yet at the same time, that's when I was beginning to really connect with my higher power, to really understand the value of honesty, to really know that this was something to work diligently toward and not to play at. And I built a community of people who knew the worst things I had done. And that was the most liberating thing I had ever known, because I had spent so much time thinking no one can know the real me, and I have to have this outward self that's so likable and so undisturbing, so non-confrontational, that to go into these rooms and talk about these horrific things I had done and this tremendous pain I had caused, and have people love me and have people have faith that I was going in the right direction was just unbelievable. I might have found that in the other program too, but I never gambled on it. I never, there was stuff I was still not bringing out, but I've done that now. And when I went into prison, I took the program with me. I mean, I had my sponsor and I communicated regularly by email and phone and letter. I had a couple of sponsees who stayed with me. I had people in the program who just showed up for me over and over again in different ways. And I found people in there. I found other sex offenders who were willing to acknowledge that their problem was addiction. And we built groups. There were different groups. One was religious based, and one was actually through the chapel, and one was SAA. I had SAA meetings going on the prison yard, the exercise yard, and have kept this program with me all the way through. And now that I'm out, I've been out about a year and a half since I got out of the halfway house. Not quite that. So I've been sort of back in the world and free for over a year. And the center of it is SAA. How much time do I have, by the way? I'm not timing myself.
You've got 13 minutes.
Oh, really? Okay. It's interesting. That's great, because it seemed like I was getting lost in the past, which I tend to do. So, okay, I'm good. Thank you. So that's the narrative. And I'm skipping things. I mean, there was other wretched shit I did along the way. And there were numerous iterations of awful things, but that's the big stuff. One of the things I find painful looking back, and this is one of the things I most have to forgive myself for, and I have to work at self-forgiveness for this, is how many times I was right there with the tools. I mean, when I was in the other S program and starting to get into this horrible stuff online, the tools were there. I knew I could tell somebody. I knew I could go to somebody and say, hey, I'm not really talking about my porn issues here, or I've always downplayed them as just, whatever, but I didn't do it. And I was afraid. I was afraid to lose like my last coping strategies. The trap, the prison I made that led me to the actual downloading of these images that got me arrested was that I had wasted time, procrastinated. I was in danger of blowing a deadline on a book I was writing for a really prestigious publisher. It was a book I had a lot of faith in, but I was nowhere near where I should be. And I was afraid to say, hey, to the editor, look, I'm kind of stuck here. I'm kind of in a place I can't get myself out of. And I always wanted to make it seem like I could do things on my own. That's what I learned when I was a kid. Act like you could do it on your own, because people didn't want me to be needy. Mom didn't want me to be needy. And so I was taking Ritalin. I was taking amphetamines to, increase the speed of the work and my focus. That also increased my obsessive compulsiveness. It agitated me. It increased my sex drive. It hurt my, give me a sense of grandiosity. It hurt my decision-making capacity. So I was, using these coping mechanisms to solve this problem. And that just pushed me into the rest of it. I don't know that I would have gone to the illegal stuff without the amphetamines. I might have, I don't know, just the progressive nature of this disease, but it became this cocktail, fear, adrenaline, drugs, just the pharmaceutical level, but drugs and the damned internet. the poem of images, the poem of clicking, the poem of the hyperlink. But the thing is, and again, I was in a 12-step S program, and I wasn't talking about any of this stuff at any realistic level. But what I have to see, and what I do remind myself, is that I am where I'm supposed to be. I went through that experience. In some ways, I wish I had the good stuff from my old life back. I wish I hadn't hurt Jenny so much, and I wish I hadn't. Thank you, Cindy. I wish I hadn't done these incredibly hurtful things and participated in this really evil part of the world under, this piece of society that's so horrible. But what I gained was so tremendous. Prison was an extraordinary experience. Being in there with hundreds of men who had done the same thing I had and talking to them and being able to be of service to them and let them be of service to me, being part of this community. My participation in SAA has just been magnificent. And now, coming out with my writing career kind of destroyed by public disclosure of my crimes, coming out of halfway house, I got hired to work in a homeless shelter, and that's where I still am. Year and a half later, I'm working in a navigation site down at 6th and Mission, real rough part of town, and really just marginal people, and I know I'm really valued there, and I love that work. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I need to get away from it. But I'm actually applying now to become a case manager. I want to move up in that field. I want to do more. I want to have more impact. I want to have more day-to-day contact with these people who are suffering from schizophrenia and mostly heavy drug abuse, tremendous amount of fentanyl use going on there. And I'm just seeing addicts at kind of the lowest, most broken place addiction can take a person. And I'm showing up and I'm connecting with them. I'm not in a position to counsel people, but I bring the message as best I can, just the general message of hope and recovery. And that's a huge gift. I just think, even though I kind of miss the writing days and being on NPR and all this glamorous, fun stuff that made me feel special, good old special. I'd rather be doing this. I'm not writing. I may come back. I do feel like maybe I could write my story at some point. There'd be some value in writing what I've been through. But right now, I'm just loving this connection, this difficult, often really sad, painful, but sometimes joyous connection. And I'm loving being with Jenny. We're living apart. That's indefinite. She hit me with that when I was in prison, and it's not what I wanted to hear. But I also kind of saw it coming, after I knew there were things I'd left. I left another time bomb for her when I went to prison. She was, I'll let her talk about that. And in some ways, we always were better kind of living apart, honestly. And so we're sort of back to what, superficially, an older model of what we were. We dated for 10 years before we lived together. And now we're kind of back there. We're actually getting a legal divorce, separating the money, just to separate the money all the way, especially since I may still be in, not that I'm necessarily in legal jeopardy, but I'm messy, registered sex offender, felon. I got hit with a lawsuit in prison that could conceivably happen again. So we're really separating out and divorcing. And yet the time we have together is just wonderful. We see each other. The communication is kind of like it never was. It's sort of wonderfully unloaded. It's wonderfully neutral. I mean, there's affection in it. We've grown up together. We've been on this long life journey together, and we share so much. And it's just this clearly bounded communication. I mean, two separate people communicating, and yet with an honesty that was never there, that I was so afraid of, and that she also seemed content with the lack of that honest connection in the past. I don't want to put words in her mouth. And I love her, and I am loving her without this neediness, her to think I'm special, her to bring an attention that makes me feel better when I'm feeling shaky, because I have so many resources. I have so many ways to connect with God in the moment. A quick prayer. Someone once wrote, even just wishing you could pray is a prayer. And sometimes I'm thinking, God, I wish I could just stop doing whatever laundry or whatever damn job I'm doing at the shelter, and I wish I could take some time to pray. And then I think, oh, but that's me being aware of God. That's me wanting to get out of myself. That right there is me breaking through something. And so I have this constant, either the presence of God or a knowledge that God is there. And I have so many tools, so many of these sort of miraculous, like kind of cognitive behavioral-ish tools, that are sort of hidden in the steps and that are in the work, but so many ways I can just check on something. And then when I can't do it by myself, I have people to call. I mean, Jenny's one of the people I turn to, but there's a lot of other people, sponsors and friends in the program, and there's just so many ways. And who would have thought? I think about that lonely, scared, is just desperately yearning little kid and young teenager. And then I think about this lonely, scared, superficially successful, but desperately yearning guy in his 30s and 40s I used to be. And then I think about that, that miserable man attached to the computer. And I wouldn't have thought I'd be here. I wouldn't have thought I'd be so comfortable with me and so comfortable with the truth. It's still hard sometimes, but I can always get there. The truth is always there to be gotten to. And I see it myself, which I didn't used to do. And somehow I'm very valuable. I know this. I see this in meetings, and I hear this from people in program, and I see this at work. And I don't have to be all special. I can be just sort of average, just another addict in recovery, just another guy in the room, just another employee. And just by showing up as me with God, I'm really valuable to people. I just, I'm not rescuing them. I didn't talk about my old rescuer savior fantasies, which used to be a big part of my acting out. But I mean, I'm had those too to be special. I'm not saving people. I'm just being present with people. I'm listening to people. I'm seeing people, and I'm bringing myself in as much reality as I can, so they can take what they want from me. They can find what's of value to them, and they don't have to adore me. And the irony is that in wanting to be adored and wanting to be a good guy, I mean, in this initial strategy is to seem like a good guy, I did these horrific things. I betrayed and I lied and I exploited and I hurt and I preyed on people. That's an irony. But then there's this other irony that in going through that horrific behavior and its consequences, I've actually become a person. Not remarkable. Sometimes I still want to think so, but I'm not, and that's good. But a person in this earth with people and alive and connected. And I have love. Just kind of what I always wanted. And never knew what it was, but I think I'm figuring that out now. I think I'm discovering that now. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Many thanks to Gerry for sharing his powerful story. At a speaker meeting last year, and as well as at the retreat this year, Gerry and I were talking about having him as a guest on the podcast. And I'm so grateful to finally be able to share this recording, and I would definitely welcome him as a guest on a future episode. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I wanted to talk about the Summer of Sponsorship workshop happening in Sacramento next weekend, July 6th. I had posted information for that on the Bay Area SAA.org website, as well as sending out an email to our inner group. So I wanted to read a little bit about that here. The Summer of Sponsorship event is coming up this Saturday, July 6th. To register, please click on the Eventbrite link below. It costs $25 to attend to help pay for the room, or $35 with breakfast and lunch included. And I included a link to that in the email, and I will be leaving that in the show notes as well. This workshop's theme is the importance of sponsorship. We are looking forward to a safe gathering of members of our Sex Addicts Anonymous Fellowship for a day of growth, fellowship, and fun. Sponsorship can be hard. Finding a sponsor can be challenging. The importance of having a sponsor cannot be overstated. In fact, we have organized a panel of sponsors and sponsees to share lessons learned and best practices to reinforce that message. No matter what step or steps a member is working on, you will find help and encouragement. Who knows, you might even meet your sponsor during the workshop activities. Rather than remaining in isolation, suffering the negative aspects of our addiction alone, we choose to share openly with one another in a safe, nurturing, and even fun environment. So plan on having a great and memorable day at the Summer of Sponsorship Workshop, Saturday, July 6th in Sacramento. And yeah, I am honored to be one of the panelists, as well as recording a section of that for the podcast. And I'm really, really looking forward to that. So yeah, if you are in Northern California, whether you live in the Bay Area or Stockton or even Reno, all are about 2 hours from Sacramento. And where I'm coming from in San Jose, it is about a 2-hour drive, but I will be there from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and we're really looking forward to that. So again, I'll be leaving links to that in the show notes. And for those outside of Northern California, look for that as a future episode of the podcast. Now I wanted to get to some listener email. Just thinking of last week's episode, 132 with Yale from Israel. I got an email that says, "Can you ask Yale to be my sponsor? LOL, but serious." I love how she said she thought it was also important for men to see women that are also sex addicts and that men aren't just monsters or something like that. I live in Vancouver in Canada, and so far all the meetings I've been to are all men. Anyhow, pretty incredible to hear a female Israeli sex addict, and I feel a lot of relatability. And yeah, I had emailed this person back, and I sent this email off to Yale. And we also got an email for David P., who was on episode 131, and I've been passing along emails to him as well. And this one says, "Hi, Jason. I just wanted to thank you so much for the podcast and all the service you do working on it. I recently heard David P.'s episode, and I am left speechless by his story. It's been great hearing all the different stories you highlight, and I'm just very grateful for it. Thanks for recording that, and keep up the good work. Signed, Jay." And yes, I will be sending this one off to David. And I know after talking with him that he really appreciates hearing all the praise for that episode. And he's gotten quite a few texts and things from people in our meetings. And yeah, it's incredibly powerful. And I believe on episode 132, I did mention that I received an email through the Bay Area SAA.org website, someone that was looking to have his first step done on the podcast, and I've been in correspondence with him. So that will be a future episode, and we're still trying to work out the details on that. There is one last email that we received this week that included some song recommendations, and after hearing them and reading the email, I wanted to save that one for next week's episode. I had mentioned in a previous episode that Hai Lung, one of my favorite bands in recovery that I've found, has just released a video for the song Troust, which was recorded at Red Rocks in 2021. I did mention then that I had played this song on the podcast before, and I didn't think I wanted to share it here again. But looking back at the episodes that I did talk about it, episode 45, which was Personal Recovery Depends Upon SAA Unity, I talked about the unity of voices that was really powerful in that song. And on episode 98 of the podcast, where I was talking about throat singing, I played a sample of me throat singing with that song. But I didn't really talk about the context, the lyrics, and especially in this video, the ritual being shown. And I will put a trigger warning for anyone that wishes to watch the video. When I saw this live, it was just incredibly powerful. But the Hari warriors that accompany Hai Lung up on stage all wear the same thing, whether they're men or women, which is black pants and no top. They're covered in a war paint, so there is some nudity in this video. And during the ritual, there is a sacrifice using ropes. So if either of those things are triggering, I recommend not watching it, but otherwise it is an incredibly powerful piece. After seeing this live in 2022 and watching various videos, I've been trying to figure out exactly what the ritual performance means. My interpretation of it is a sacrifice and rebirth. And so I wanted to read a little bit about the song itself. The first and last verses are from the first Merseburg charm and the second Merseburg charm I talked about on episode 70 in the song Hammer Hippier. And the Merseburg charms are the only known surviving relics of pre-Christian pagan poetry in Old High German, and these were written in the 10th century by a cleric. So with the first Merseburg charm, which is the beginning and ending of the song, the spell is a blessing of release, Lösesegen, describing how a number of women were freed from their shackles, warriors caught during battle. And the last two lines contain magic words, leap forth from the fetters, escape from the foes. The bulk of the lyrics come from a book of spells called Grogalder, and there are 9 different stanzas, each being a different part of the charm. And after each stanza, the part that I throat sang along with Fjon ve eg af mer fjana minaran og rethirika mana. That is, I wash off the hatred of my enemies and the theft and anger of rich men. So after each stanza of the charm, they sing that in unison, and it is incredibly powerful. During that part of the ritual, like I said, this could be a trigger warning for people. One of the Hari warriors, Bella, is tied up in ropes and sacrificed by Kai in the middle of a circle. When I first saw this, I was just absolutely shocked by what was happening. And as it comes back to the Merseburg charm at the end of the song, Maria comes up and pulls out the spear that has been tied to Bella, and she is reborn. And there's a part in this recording where you can hear the entire audience at Red Rocks erupt in cheer. And when I listen to this, I'm just blown away by that. And it's right as Maria is singing, "Escape the bonds, flee the enemy." And it is incredibly powerful. So I wanted to play a little bit of that here. So amazing. And yeah, this one gets me very choked up and emotional. And I am eagerly looking forward to the rest of the Red Rocks performance being released in August. And just this week, I've been releasing a lot emotionally. One of the artists that I talked about on episode 129 was Lisa Gerard from Dead Can Dance. And her song, Sanveyan, I Am Your Shadow, is a song that brings me to tears every time I hear it. And just reading about it the other day, I didn't even hear the music and I was already tearing up. This is one that I go to as an emotional release. As a matter of fact, this was played in an episode of The West Wing, and I had already known the song prior to that, but woo, tears were flowing. So when I was researching this the other day, I started reading this thing that says I was watching The West Wing the other day, and Lisa Gerard Sanvillan was so emotionally charged that it literally made me cry. And that episode of West Wing was already emotionally charged, but to have her music on top of it was just outstanding. So anyway, I had talked about wanting to play this on the podcast and feeling the emotional release in Troust. I also wanted to play this, and then I've got another piece that kind of lifts up out of this after this is over, but such an incredibly powerful piece of music. So a little bit about that. This is not sung in any language. It's something that she completely made up on her own. And so without any meaning behind the lyrics that she's singing, just the emotion that she put into this is incredibly powerful. On the previous episode, I mentioned that I've gotten a lot of new music, and I'm going to be focusing some of those songs on future episodes. Some new Vardruna Ivar just put out a new album, as well as Kati Ran, and I've been playing their music on the podcast for a while. I've also been watching a lot of reaction videos and being turned on to music that I've heard about for the past couple of years, Dirty Loops being one of them. I heard about them through a program friend. Very cool, funky jazz, incredible artists. Anyway, there's a band that I was aware about a few years ago called Bloodywood, and this is an Indian folk metal band. For anyone that knows about Bollywood, Indian films that have music and dance, this is kind of a play on Bollywood and Bloodywood. So I've heard a couple of their songs and have really enjoyed it, but I had just found the song Aj, and it's so awesome. And it reminds me a lot of Linkin Park, and having a rapper and a singer that can go into a metal voice, kind of going back and forth. But I love the powerful message in the song. Yeah, I wanted to play a little bit of the end, but at the beginning, I see a bright light waiting at the end of the tunnel, and I might die in the dark, but the pain is part of the struggle. I got my demons at my back, but I'm ready to rumble. I've found my reason to fight. And the part that I believe is sung in Hindi that I wanted to play here is, Today I rise, the past below me, facing the sky, as long as my heart continues to beat. I uproot myself from a life of unfulfillment. Today I am reborn. And again, this kind of goes along with the theme in Troust, the notion of being reborn through sacrifice in Troust, being reborn through the struggle in Aj. And so here is Bloodywood with the song Aj.
I see a bright light waiting at the end of the tunnel, and I might die in the dark, but the pain is part of the struggle. I got my demons at my back, but I'm ready to rumble. I found my reason to fight, so this time I am the trouble. I may be knocked back, but I will battle on and rock that. Gonna make it harder than hell, spawn and top that. Push the limits, and if it's a fight, then I'm in it, finish it.
I just love the energy in this one and the beauty in it. And so after having the emotional release of listening to Lisa Gerrard this week and having this to kind of bounce me back, these are the songs that have been getting me through for this week, and really wanted to share that here on the podcast. And like I mentioned, there are a couple of incredibly powerful songs that were shared on an email that I will talk about in next week's episode, which will be part 2 of the SAA and COSA Speaker meeting, and this time with Gerry's wife, Jenny. And so look forward to that. Also coming up in the future, I had mentioned trying to get the first step recorded. I will be scheduling a few other interviews. I also intend to share Joe and Charlie talking about Step 5, getting back to the Joe and Charlie series. I am also scheduling a music and recovery episode that will be a group discussion for episode 138. We are 138, the Misfits of Recovery. Me and Sean are huge Misfits fans, and we wanted to talk about what music was like in active addiction and what it's been like in recovery. And if you wanted to be part of that discussion, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, and you can also ask any questions about the podcast or the program there. If you want to leave feedback for the podcast, like the ones that I read on this episode, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. So with that, I'll close out the episode. I wanted to thank you so much for listening, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.